I never imagined life would come to this. After my husband died 2 years ago, the silence in the grew louder each day. The laughter faded, the routine felt mechanical, and I stopped caring about things that once made me smile. Then, one rainy evening, my stepson Aaron arrived with a suitcase and a tired smile. "It's temporary," he said. I didn't ask questions. I simply nodded and showed him to the spare room. Aaron was 21, polite, quiet, and carried a gentleness that reminded me of better days. At first, our conversations were brief, casual chats about groceries, his college classes, and how badly he missed his father. But as days passed, our silence grew comfortable. We began sharing meals. He'd make coffee in the mornings. I'd leave an extra blanket on the couch when he stayed up late. Slowly, we began rebuilding something I thought was lost: connection. He'd help with chores without asking, open jars I couldn't twist, and sometimes playfully correct my grammar during crossword puzzles. I'd catch myself smiling at him, not as a son, but as a presence that made the loneliness less suffocating. I told myself it was nothing, just a mother thankful for help. One evening, I fell asleep on the couch. The soft hum of a movie still echoed in the background. When I opened my eyes hours later, a blanket had been draped over me, and the lamp was off. I looked around. Aaron had gone to bed. I stood there for a moment, unsure why my heart fluttered. There were other moments, small, quiet ones. He'd linger in the kitchen, waiting for me to speak. His eyes held something I couldn't name. I brushed it off. I was being silly. But every time he smiled, every time he sat beside me just a little too close, something in me stirred. It had been years since I felt noticed. I remember telling my friend over the phone, "It's just nice having someone around again." But even then, I knew it wasn't just that. The way he looked at me during dinner. The way his hand brushed mine while reaching for the remote. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing he could be blamed for. But things that made my thoughts drift at night. I blamed my own mind. I told myself grief does strange things. Maybe I missed intimacy so much that I'd started seeing shadows in kindness. Still, I couldn't shake the warmth in my chest whenever he asked how my day was, or complimented my cooking. It was dangerous. I knew it, but I did nothing, because it felt good to be seen again. Not as someone broken. Not as a widow, but as a woman. Even if only for a moment. Even if he never meant to make me feel that way. And even if he did. May 8th, 8:34 a.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. That night started like any other. I went to bed early, exhausted from a long day. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and distant city noise. I drifted into sleep easily. But somewhere around midnight, I felt the mattress shift. Half asleep, I turned over and found Aaron lying beside me. My heart jumped. Before I could speak, he whispered, "I had a nightmare. I didn't want to be alone." His voice was soft, almost childlike. I froze, unsure of what to do. But then I remembered, he lost his father, just like I lost my husband. Maybe this was just grief taking a different form. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just lay there, tense and confused, listening to his breathing slow beside me. At some point, I fell back asleep. The next morning, I got up early and went straight to the kitchen. He followed minutes later, looking downcast. "I'm sorry about last night," he said quickly, eyes not meeting mine. I wasn't thinking straight. I nodded, pretending it didn't matter. "It's okay," I said. "Just get better sleep tonight." We didn't talk more about it. But that moment never left my mind. In the days that followed, things changed. He was more reserved, but his eyes lingered longer. He'd pause when I walked into the room, like he had something to say, but couldn't. I caught him watching me a few times, nothing inappropriate, just observing. Reading me. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. Something had shifted and we both knew it. He started staying up later, always in the living room, always waiting. When I'd go to bed, he'd say goodnight with a softness that didn't feel like a son to his mother. I began avoiding eye contact. I stopped wearing my nightgown, opting instead for thick pajamas. Still, the tension remained. Then came the touch. Not forced. Not planned. I was handing him a dish towel, and his fingers brushed mine. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. The contact was brief, but it left me rattled. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. Was I imagining all this? Or did he feel it too? I remembered how he tucked my hair behind my ear the other day when it fell in my face. The way his hand rested on my back a moment too long when I stumbled. Each touch harmless on its own, but together, they painted something I didn't want to see. I told myself to set boundaries, to create distance. But I didn't. Not really. Part of me, ashamedly, enjoyed the attention. It filled a hollow space I hadn't acknowledged in years. That space where a woman wants to feel wanted. And in the quiet of night, I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was blooming in the dark, and I was too afraid to name it. He didn't pretend anymore. One evening, as I folded laundry, Aaron stood across from me and said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to get upset." I looked up, unsure what to expect. He took a breath. "I don't see you as just a mother anymore. I've tried to ignore it, but I can't. I care about you in a way that I know I shouldn't." My hands froze. The air left the room. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh it off or take it back. He didn't. I wanted to scream, to correct him, to tell him how wrong it was. But my throat closed. Because as much as I hated it, I had known. I had felt it too. In the quiet exchanges, the subtle touches, the lingering eyes, I had known. And I hadn't stopped it. I had let it grow, in silence, hoping it would fade. But now it had a name, and there was no turning back. I said his name once firmly. That was all I could manage. He looked ashamed, but not surprised. I turned away, heart racing, hands shaking. I told him to leave me alone for the night. He didn't argue. As soon as the door closed behind him, I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to collect myself. All I could feel was guilt, not just at him, but at myself. Because part of me didn't feel disgusted. Part of me felt wanted. The days that followed were heavy. We didn't speak unless necessary. But I knew he was still watching me, waiting for something to change. Then came the moment that shattered everything. It was a Saturday night. I had just come out of the bathroom when he stood in the hallway. No words, just silence. And then, without warning, he leaned in and tried to kiss me. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't forceful. But it was real. Real enough for me to feel my stomach turn. I stepped back instantly and said, "No, just that one word." He looked away, ashamed. I walked past him without another glance. The next morning, I packed his things. He didn't argue. He only asked, "Is this goodbye?" I said yes. Not because I hated him, but because I couldn't trust either of us anymore. Before he left, he said quietly, "I never meant to hurt you." I nodded, but couldn't speak. I watched him leave with a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain. That night, I opened my journal and wrote the truth I had avoided for weeks. I let this happen. Not physically, but emotionally. I let myself feel something I knew was off limits. And when he crossed the line, part of me had already done it silently. That was the real betrayal, not his feelings, but mine. The guilt of wanting something I was never supposed to want. May 8th, 8:35 a.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. Weeks passed without a word from Aaron. The house felt emptier than before, but it wasn't the silence that bothered me. It was the aftermath. I kept replaying everything. His words. His gaze. My silence. It wasn't just what happened, it was the fact that I allowed it to get that far. I had let loneliness blur boundaries. I had mistaken attention for affection. And now, I was left sitting in the wreckage of something that should never have begun. People say time heals, but time also forces you to confront things you've buried. I began questioning every moment since my husband died. Had I really been living or just surviving? I mistook Aaron's kindness as something deeper because I was desperate to feel human again. I had built a cage around my grief, and the first person who noticed me, I opened the door without thinking. One afternoon, I got a message from him. Just one line. "I'm sorry, truly." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I knew answering would reopen a door I had finally managed to close. I needed distance to breathe again, to figure out who I was outside the roles of mother, widow, or woman seeking comfort. I needed to take back control over a story that spiraled too fast. I started therapy. The first session, I sat frozen for minutes before I could even speak. But when I finally opened up, I realized the betrayal wasn't about Aaron. It was about me losing sight of myself. I let the ache of being unseen guide my choices, and it led me somewhere dark. I let my boundaries weaken for the sake of feeling close to someone. And now, I was the one left to clean the emotional mess. Healing wasn't instant. I had to accept responsibility, not for what he did, but for the silence I maintained, for the moments I should have spoken up, for the nights I should have put space between us. It was painful, but necessary. I learned that betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It comes in smiles, in late-night conversations, in a longing that creeps in unnoticed. Aaron moved out of state. I heard through a relative that he enrolled in a program and was trying to start over. That gave me peace. Maybe he'd grow from it too. Maybe we both would. I didn't hate him. I pitied us both for being lost in a moment that neither of us truly understood. Now I focus on rebuilding. I take walks. I volunteer. I read books I used to love. I still sleep alone, but I no longer dread the quiet. It reminds me that peace isn't found in someone else. It's built slowly within. And love, real love, doesn't grow in shadows. It exists where truth lives. I'll never forget what happened, but I no longer let it define me. I was broken, yes, but not beyond repair. And that, in the end, is the most honest kind of redemption.